Modern life has complicated diet to the point where most people have no idea what to eat. Like, are we supposed to be plant-based, vegan, carnivore? Do we count the calories or do the calories not matter? Do we do low fat or do we do ketogenic? Is processed food okay or is it not? I feel like there is a registered dietitian out there arguing for every single one of these points. No other species experiences this much conflict over what it should be eating. Welcome to On Earth with Lisa. Today I am going to simplify the way you relate to food for the rest of your life. No more crash dieting, no more getting caught up in trends. What I'm about to describe to you is not a diet, although some people might call it that, but ultimately it is just the natural human diet, a return to our ancient biology. It is a set of descriptive principles for meeting the needs of our bodies with the abundant nourishment that nature provides. As such, the benefits are countless. People who eat this way have seen their skin clear, their digestion improve, chronic illnesses reverse, improvements in body composition, hair and nails growing stronger, energy improving, mental health improving, becoming less prone to sunburn, and more. Why? Because the body's natural state is health when you give it what it needs. It truly is as simple as that. Before we dive in, I'm just a girl. I am not a dietitian or doctor or medical professional, although I did study nutrition as a nutritional therapy practitioner a few years back. So this is not medical advice, but I think a lot of the people out there that are qualified on paper to give medical advice are completely incoherent and contradicting each other and doing a pretty bad job. So I am just going to share what I have observed through what I've learned through nutrition study, as well as nature and the historical pattern of humanity. Because this is not just something I'm making up here. This is just human behavior over the course of thousands of years. So are you ready for this? The principles of the natural human diet. First principle, humans are omnivores. Our dentition, digestive systems, and the entirety of human history point to our being omnivorous. Omni means everything. We live on an abundant living planet with such a wide range of things that nourish us and benefit us in different ways. So I'm gonna run through basically every life form and how you can eat it for optimal health. First, animals. Animals provide nourishment in so many different ways. There's meat, milk, eggs, seafood. Eat a variety of animals from nose to tail, from land and sea, and cooked and raw. Animal foods are by far the most nutrient-dense foods on Earth objectively. Nutrients are just in their most bioavailable forms. For example, vitamin A from animals is called retinol, which is the form that your body can use without any conversion processes being necessary. Whereas the plant form of vitamin A is beta-carotene, which your body still needs to turn into retinol once it gets there, and some people make this conversion more easily than others. There's also mineral examples like iron. There's heme iron found in animal foods, which is really easy for your body to use, and then there's non-heme iron in plant foods. Same goes for phosphorus, really easy to absorb from animal foods and so useful to our bodies. And from plant foods, it often comes in the form of phytic acid, which is a whole different situation. We're going to get a little more into that when we start talking about seeds, grains, and legumes. Animal foods like meat, organs, seafood, eggs, and dairy need to be the backbone of your diet for optimal nutrition. Eating nose to tail is so important. Our ancestors did not waste any part of an animal. Most of us in the modern world are not hunting, fishing, and butchering our own animals. So most of us aren't confronted with what it's like to take a life, how much work it takes to procure and process it, and just how many edible parts an animal has. The muscles of an animal are what we typically regard as meat, things like your chicken breasts and thighs and legs, and your steaks and roasts and chops. There's also tongue, bone marrow, connective tissue, fats and organs, heart, liver, tripe, and glands. And so many people in the modern day haven't even tried these foods. And unbeknownst to many, this is actually highly detrimental to our health. For example, most of us today just eat muscle meat. Well, muscle meat is high in the amino acid methionine, which needs to be balanced by glycine, or else cardiac health can suffer and you can deplete your vitamin A. Where is glycine found? It's found in the gelatinous broths and stocks that you get from slow simmering connective tissue and bones. It's found when you slow braise a piece of tough meat that's full of that connective tissue. So it's so important to be including those less desirable, tougher cuts and bones in your diet. But when you're just looking at parceled and packaged meats on a grocery store shelf, you're not seeing the whole animal and you're not seeing that reality. We are made to eat the entire animal. And of course, that brings us to the organ meats. Organ meats, bone marrow, and animal fats richly supply us with the fat-soluble vitamins A, D, E, and K. And so do seafood, eggs, and full-fat dairy. Every traditional culture includes animal foods in their diet, utilizes the whole animal, and renders its fats for cooking. Our ancestors did not have processed seed oils. Every traditional culture also utilizes both raw and cooked animal foods, and I wanted to give this a little bit of emphasis since this is another thing that a lot of people aren't probably used to. Cooking with heat makes some nutrients more available, but also destroys some. So it's good to use a combination of cooked and raw foods. This goes for your vegetables and such as well, but we'll get into that when we get into the plant kingdom. Cooking pre-digests food in a way, so it's good for most of our food to be cooked. It's very easy on our digestion and nutrient assimilation that way. But every traditional culture included some raw foods, things like tartare, carpaccio, sashimi, raw oysters, raw egg yolks, or taking a bite of the raw liver or heart right after hunting an animal. That's a thing. Raw dairy is a deeply nourishing food, and I highly recommend eating raw fermented dairy like kefir and various cheeses. We'll talk about fermentation in a little bit. Note that the way an animal is raised does have an impact on its nutritional value. Just like what you eat matters, what an animal eats matters too. Just like you should be eating your natural diet, which we're talking about in this video, an animal should be eating its natural diet. So do try to source from local and regenerative farms or wild caught, maybe do some hunting and fishing yourself, or at least get the grocery store label organic and grass-fed or pasture-raised. If financial limitations make this difficult for you, I totally get it. There are some really great wild-caught tinned seafood options like sardines and oysters. Make sure you get canned in water because a lot of them are canned in seed oils and that's not good. And at the end of the day, conventional ground beef or eggs from a factory farm is actually still more nutrient dense than any vegetable. You need animal foods, so don't neglect them. Now let's get into the plant kingdom. Our ancestors ate fruits and vegetables in season because that's what was there. It's how their ecosystem fed them. Now granted, we're living in the modern world, so note that the modern world be poisoning and shipping things. So of course we want to aim for things that are local and organic or otherwise chemical and pesticide free. I encourage you to grow, pick, or forage some fruits or vegetables or herbs yourself just to drive home how perfect the seasons are in terms of nourishment. Fruit is so hydrating and so high in antioxidants that literally support your body in the way that you need as the seasons change. Like when summer is setting in and the sun is getting more intense, berries bring protective antioxidants. And then towards the end of the season, you have things like apples, squashes, and potatoes that are ready to harvest and store so well for the winter and provide starches that help you to keep yourself warm in the winter. I could go on, but basically seasonal produce is an incredible gift from nature. Another absolute win from the plant kingdom is herbs. Herbs are amazing friends on the therapeutic level to find balance in our bodies, and they're also a fantastic way to support your daily nourishment. I'm sipping on an herbal brew today. This one is a mineral-rich tea made with red raspberry leaf, peppermint, holy basil, oat straw, milky oat top, alfalfa, stinging nettle, chickweed, and rose hips. But yeah, therapeutic herbalism is one thing, but there's also the daily herbalism that you can start practicing today. This is such a big and beautiful topic that I'm gonna have to give it its own video at some point, but think using fresh herbs with your meals for flavor and digestion. And then herbal teas throughout the day to provide an extra layer of nourishment and modulate how you feel. Okay, the next food group I want to dive into is seeds. Your grains, legumes, nuts, and seeds. The seed food group needs a bit of preparation before it's readily digestible for humans. This is because they all contain anti-nutrients which need to be broken down, as well as delicate polyunsaturated fatty acids. Those are your omega-3s and 6s, which you do need, but they also need careful handling because they go rancid easily. So proper preparation includes soaking, sprouting, and fermentation of these foods. Soaking activates the life inside the seed. So it goes from this self-protective dormant stage to kind of shooting its shot and going into its growth stage. Enzymes activate and utilize those anti-nutrients to kickstart that new life from the seed. Nutrients become more bioavailable, and some of the starches inside are used or changed, reducing glycemic impact in the case of grains and legumes. So proper preparation is actually a pretty cool process where you're essentially helping nature along to make the food more digestible and nutritious for you. Grains and legumes are foods that I exclusively source organic because conventionally produced grains and legumes are actually sprayed down with glyphosate as a desiccant to kill the plant and cause it to dry out more effectively for easier harvesting and storage. Glyphosate is horrible for our health. It's tied to many health problems, so I avoid glyphosate at all costs. Now, many people choose to actually cut grains and legumes out of their diet for this reason, but I just source from brands like 1 Degree Organics or Azure Standard because they actually test and verify that their products are glyphosate free. So there is good stuff out there, and these are honestly just such nourishing foods that I would hate to cut them out. So I'll run through some specifics for our grains, legumes, nuts, and seeds here. For grains, avoid processed grains and opt for whole grains. You can buy wheat berries in bulk and freshly mill them. A lot of people get a special grain mill for this purpose, but I actually use my Vitamix blender. There's like a dry pitcher that you can use. And if you're just making a couple cups of flour at a time like I do, it is very sufficient. I've been using it for years. When you use freshly milled flour, it has all of the nutrients of that whole grain still there and fresh. Fresh is important because when flour is milled, the air exposure causes those delicate polyunsaturated fats to begin going rancid, and nutrients like vitamin E start to break down. So if you mill more than you need to, I would suggest sealing it and refrigerating it, but ultimately just milling fresh before you bake is ideal. I will either grind whole grains before baking or use all-purpose organic flour because it has the hull removed, which is basically all of those nutrients and all of the fiber is removed, but there's also nothing rancid there. So I do keep that around for convenience. Now for the proper preparation of grains, remember that's soaking, sprouting, or fermentation. You can buy pre-sprouted grains. For example, I get the oats from 1 Degree Organic that are sprouted. I also have a big bag of sprouted emigraines that I got from Azure. You can sprout your own, or you can leverage soaking and fermentation by making things like soaked porridge or sourdough. Sourdough is probably the fermented grain that you are most familiar with. Fermentation is actually how bread was made. Now, the quick yeast fermentation of modern breads is not the same and does not engage the same processes as a longer sourdough fermentation. So I definitely prefer sourdough here. I've been making it myself for many years, and it really is simpler than most people think. Like, you associate it with so many rules and little tricks and stuff. But guys, I'm breaking all the sourdough rules. You can really kind of make it your own. For a really good porridge, I like to take some freshly milled flour, generally a coarser grind, so it has some texture to it, and soak it in milk at a 1:4 grain to milk ratio. I use raw milk, which has some good bacteria that can start fermentation, and just let it sit in the saucepan overnight and then just turn on the heat in the morning and cook it. And you can also pop the saucepan in the fridge and do essentially the same thing. It is one of my favorite simple, nourishing breakfasts. Now, for proper preparation of your legumes, I love soaking and sprouting them. It's really so simple. You just take your legumes and put them in warm water. A little dash of something acidic, like some lemon juice or apple cider vinegar helps, and let them soak overnight. After you drain and rinse them, you can totally cook them right then and there. The soaking has activated that life in the seed. Or you can take it a step further in terms of making those nutrients more bioavailable and changing the glycemic index by sprouting. And again, this is a natural process that the bean is just inclined to do because you have activated it. So all that really entails is leaving your drained beans out on the counter, giving them a rinse every now and then to make sure bacteria and stuff isn't growing on them. And over the course of a couple days, allowing them to sprout. They just do it. So you'll see the little roots starting to come out, and at that point you can cook them. Legumes are amazing because they're a source of carbs that comes with fiber and protein, and a lot of the starch in them is indigestible and actually feeds your gut microbes. So beans really are magical. As for nuts and seeds, these tend to have a higher fat content. Again, that is those omega-6 and omega-3 polyunsaturated fatty acids. And they are so delicate. So heat, air, and time can make them go rancid. So I suggest you store your nuts in the refrigerator, and then to properly prepare, you can soak them in cool salted water for a day. This activates them and then dry them over very low heat to make them crispy again. Again, too much heat makes those delicate fatty acids go rancid and can cause acrylamides to form, which are really bad for you. But that's how you properly prepare nuts. If you do choose to eat them raw, you totally can. I would just suggest eating them sparingly because they do have a lot of those anti-nutrients, which are mineral binding. So they're not great for your gut health, and they're really not great for your dental health. And again, this is true for all the different types of seeds. So your grains, your legumes, your nuts, and your seeds. So that does it for the plant kingdom, but how about fungi? Mushrooms are incredible. They help us adapt. Think of adaptogenic mushrooms like chaga and reishi. Cooked mushrooms have fiber in them that bind to toxins in the gut. They have inulin, which feeds your gut microbiome. They're so high in protective antioxidants. So be sure to include mushrooms in your diet. They're truly an incredible food source. Yeast is also a fungus, which is most often used to ferment things, like your sourdough bread, kombucha, kefir. Many starter cultures, like your kombucha and your kefir grains, are called SCOBY, which is an acronym standing for Symbiotic Colony of Bacteria and Yeast. And naturally, this leads us to a very important dietary principle, which is fermentation. Bacteria. Our ancestors prepared and preserved foods via fermentation forever before modern refrigeration came about because it's a natural process. Our planet is teeming with life, especially on the microscopic level. You actually have more bacteria cells making up your physiology than you do human cells. So do not sleep on the probiotics. Bacteria are so vital to your life. Did you know that fermentation increases the nutritional value of food? When you turn raw cabbage into sauerkraut, it can increase the amount of vitamin C by as much as 20 times. When you ferment dairy like kefir, yogurt, and cheese, the bacteria eat up the lactose. So fermented dairy products are much easier for a lactose intolerant person to tolerate. And these foods add helpful microbes to your gut. There are microbes in your gut which actually take indigestible fibers and turn them into nutrients for you to absorb. Butyrate is a really important example, which provides energy to the cells of your gut lining directly. You also have gut bacteria which produce certain B vitamins and vitamin K. Sourdough is easier to digest, just like any other fermented grain like we discussed earlier. And many cultures even have fermented meats like prosciutto, salami, and gravlax. I can't get over it. Fermentation is just so cool. And so many people have no idea how to practice this in the home kitchen anymore, even though this was so prevalent with our ancestors. You can get some raw ferments at stores. Just make sure that they're labeled raw. There's some really great options at Costco. They've got sauerkraut, kimchi, kombucha. I know you can find stuff at Whole Foods and places like that too. But yes, you've got to be including ferments in your diet. I suggest including them at every meal. Something like a fermented beverage or some sauerkraut or kimchi, cheese, or another fermented dairy product with every meal to help you digest that meal, to assimilate more nutrients, and to be constantly adding probiotics to your gut so that your digestion overall can be healthier. So much of your immune system, as well as your mental health and happy hormones, are actually rooted in the gut and your gut microbiome. So replenishing the life of your gut with probiotic rich ferments is so vital. Some people get grossed out thinking about eating bacteria and fungi, but like, what about insects? Guys, don't freak out. I'm talking about bees. Bees are incredible. I cannot leave them out of this conversation. Honey, honeycomb, bee pollen, propolis. Bees, literally everything they do and everything they create is so beneficial to us and to the planet at large. So shout out to the bees for being little angels among us, turning the flowers and plant life around us into perfect medicines and nourishment for our bodies to help us adapt to our surroundings, to relieve allergies, to soothe and to heal. Just wow. As a side note, though, we could go a little bit deeper into the insect conversation. There are edible insects like grasshoppers and ants and crickets and stuff. And I know we really hate those World Economic Forum kind of guys that are like, you're gonna own nothing and you're gonna eat bugs. And they've probably come up with some horrible way to factory farm bugs and just ruin it. But I will also say, in defense of bugs and the ancestral cultures that consume them, it is very actually historically normal to consume certain bugs. They are very nutrient dense, and if you choose to go down that path, they're not a bad option. It's not a big part of my diet today, but I'm not gonna say that I haven't tried it either. It's not too bad. On a more palatable note, let's talk about sugars. I am a big fan of unprocessed sugars or minimally processed sugars in moderation. Like really strict moderation, because historically speaking, sugars are hard to come by. They're limited by the seasons, as is the case with fruits and berries, or otherwise very labor intensive to produce. Like for example, I've been involved in maple syrup production in the past, and going out into the snowy woods to tap trees and then haul buckets of maple sap back into where your sugar shack and your fire is to boil it down is extremely labor intensive. And then it takes 40 gallons of that liquid maple sap to boil down into 1 gallon of maple syrup. Or in the case of honey, it's literally protected by bees. They sting. It's a little bit tough to get. But those unrefined or minimally processed sugars like your honey, your maple syrup, coconut sugar, fruits like dates and prunes, turbinado sugar, and blackstrap molasses, they're not the same as your refined white sugar. Refined white sugar has no nutrients. It just goes straight to your blood sugar and spikes it and causes metabolic turmoil. And these other sugars, while they do elevate your blood sugar, they come with nutrients, they come with minerals, or in the case of fruit, it comes with fiber and hydration. So there's beneficial elements as well that make it better for your body. Again, moderation is key, but we all love a little something sweet every now and then. So while I encourage you to prioritize your animal foods and your seasonal produce and your more savory things and your herbs for the baseline of your diet, there are fantastic natural sugar options that do benefit your health. Another really important consideration for the natural human diet is hydration. Water is a major part of your diet, of what you consume to keep yourself alive. Ideally for drinking water, we should be drinking water that's coming up from the earth and is full of minerals and not full of contaminants. But again, we live in the modern day where a lot of us are drinking tap water that is wastewater that's been filtered and has stuff added to it like the chlorine and the fluoride and things that disrupt our gut and physiological function. So what I really encourage you to do for hydration is eat it. Eat your hydration. So your seasonal produce, like your fruits, as well as things like cucumbers, which are so high in water, consuming raw milk or ferments like kefir and yogurt, as well as things like your broths and stocks and stews. Foods that are super high in water are going to come with the minerals and the nutrients that help your cells to uptake and utilize that water. Eating your hydration is ultimately more hydrating than just chugging water, especially if it's plain water. Now, of course, I'm not big into eating all day, every day. So yes, I do also drink water. And again, a really good, not contaminated spring water or well water is ideal for drinking water. Or if you're like me, I live in an apartment in the city. I filter my tap water and then add minerals to it, like a really good mineral-rich salt or an electrolyte mix, something along those lines to actually help your body uptake and utilize the water with those electrolyte minerals, because otherwise plain water is not hydrating. But that's the ideal human diet, guys. Nose to tail animal foods, seasonal produce and herbs and mushrooms, and ferments. It truly is as simple as that. We can cut the diet noise and we can learn to ignore all of the highly distracting and highly harmful things that the modern world offers. I really encourage you to avoid all processed foods and beverages, especially those with seed oils, refined sugars, refined grains. These are all bombing your metabolic health and ultimately a large part of why our population is so chronically ill. So avoid those, avoid preservatives, food colorings, artificial flavors, and all that stuff. You don't need it. You don't need to buy processed foods. Be an ingredient household. Like, that's all there is to it, right? Nose to tail animal foods, seasonal produce, and ferments. Meals can truly be so simple. If you want some examples of what that looks like, follow me on Instagram at On Earth with Lisa. I'm sharing what I'm eating there all the time, and I love a good simple meal. I think the modern diet has been complicated by design. We are so dependent and consumeristic when we just don't know. We don't know what to eat. So we do what we're told instead of what our diet and what our environment would naturally dictate. So we need to reconnect with our body, to reconnect with the cosmic dance of land and sun and seasons, and ultimately to opt out of the modern bullshit and find truly sustainable health. I would really encourage you to grow or forage something yourself so that you can really connect with where your food comes from. Get to know your local farmers. Reconnect with your place in nature. This is all so simple when you start to reforge these connections. So you might be wondering, and I didn't want to leave you hanging with this question, if it's so simple, if it really is just all about eating whole, real foods from the earth, what's with all the noise? Why are there so many diets out there? Why are people so confused? Why do some people do so well on keto where someone else might do really well on high carb? And the reason for that is that the human body is highly adaptable. There are countless macronutrient ratios and ingredients that we can take in and survive on and be in good health on. This is why we are a species that has successfully established itself on Earth in such a wide range of climates. I mean, you look at the far, far northern cultures, they do not have access to fruits. They have some plant foods, like perhaps some seaweed or cranberries or some herbs that might grow in those climates, but they're going to primarily survive on animal foods. I recently read a book. It was this one, Peter Preuchen's Book of the Eskimos, and he describes their diet of whale and seal and walruses and polar bears. But meanwhile, people who live on the equator are going to eat the antioxidant-rich fruits that are in season year-round because there is always intense sunlight. This is also a great book, Cheese Trekking, How Microbes, Landscapes, Livestock, and Human Cultures Shape Terroir. This is essentially about the same thing that we're talking about. The way humans interact with the land around them to gain their perfect nourishment. So when we are connected to our own bodies and to the land under our feet and to the seasons, our bodies and nature work together to dictate what our diet should be. We also have vastly different lifestyles and adapt to different activity levels. So someone who is highly active and does marathons is naturally going to need more carbs than someone who is more sedentary. So there's also countless ways to micro-adjust your diet to suit your place in life. But the baseline of the human diet is the same across the board, across the world, across history. That's it for this video. I really hope you find this helpful and are able to connect with the genuine simplicity of being a human being on Earth, on this gorgeous, abundant, nourishing, beautiful planet. Don't forget to subscribe before you go. Leave a comment. I would love to hear your thoughts. I read every single one and appreciate it so much. And in parting, I will tell you what I always tell you, just to sum up how we should live as humans on Earth. Let nature nourish you. Be inspired by the wholeness and beauty of it, and celebrate it all through art. Until next time.